Rules here. If you would, raise your hand. You walk to the microphone here, introduce yourself, and then if you have any questions to the court, we'll talk. We're not here to argue. If it gets out of hand, I'll ask that you be removed. So, that being said, let's start. Anything to say, Chairman?
Sure. I didn't know if this was...
Just treat it like it's a committee meeting right now. Right?
I suppose, I didn't have anything prepared other than what we've already talked about. I don't, anybody has any questions, that's what I thought. I didn't know, I didn't realize I needed to have an agenda prepared to, well, prepared to try to answer questions or something.
I'll speak if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
Make sure you talk into your microphones because they're videoing it.
Yeah,
Please.
moved it over. The committee is Mr. Faust, Mr. Henniger, and myself, and we have worked for almost 2 years now, working hard. We also had Mr. Pearson was part of the committee before he moved to White County. Anyway, we worked long and hard to get ambulance service for the county when we lost it. And no one here has any ill will towards anyone, neither companies nor people nor anything else. Our goal is to try and get ambulance service, all three of us. And we've not agreed on things every time. We've not been unanimous in our decisions, but we've always made a decision and we went forth with it. Where we stand right now, I'm kind of summarizing for the public. If I say this wrong, y'all please correct me. The last thing we did in the last committee meeting is we put together a contract. Let me back up one. The prior meeting to that, we prioritized to the companies that we were going to make contracts with in the order of Panther, Survival Flight, and Southern. And so after that was done, we went into a contract negotiations with Panther, and the county judge was involved, but we came to the table and negotiated a contract. We wrote that contract up, and we intended to bring that contract to the court for vote tonight. This public meeting prior to that is a requirement to allow the public to know what's going on as well and ask any questions. Other things have come to light, as I'm sure most of you are aware, that back in July of 21, is that the right year? A Quorum court voted on a contract with Survival Flight, and the vote was 6-5 in favor. We determined that it required a 2/3 majority, and therefore it did not pass, and that's when we went on to the next step in the process. So that's where we stand tonight. We're going to probably address all those things, and just did that to try and catch you guys up, I hope. Did I do okay?
I'd like to ask our council one question. Is this handled much like a committee meeting where we must stick to the subject?
Yes, I mean, this is a public ambulance meeting to discuss the proposal that you're potentially going to take. Now,
So that would take some of the past bickering and issues out of the subject, shouldn't be discussed tonight.
Well, I think, yes.
I understand we're here to discuss the proposal with Panther.
Yes.
And so anything prior to that shouldn't be discussed tonight.
At this meeting, right? But
At this public hearing.
This public hearing.
Thank you.
Yes.
That I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, you said tonight. I'm not sure it's not.
I'm
we're
sorry,
going to
yes.
go all night, but
Sure.
right now, yes, sir.
Let's hope. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
okay. So the prior stuff we'll talk about later.
I did have that summary sheet, I'm sorry, I wouldn't, but if you needed the numbers or anything.
I was just trying, I didn't give them numbers, I just wanted to kind of catch everybody up to where we stand right now. So, now we can probably go into the contract that we negotiated with Panther, is that correct?
Open questions.
Questions from the public?
Questions?
Don't be shy. I've gotten enough calls, I know you're not shy.
Is Heber
Can you, sir, can you come up to the mic?
Sir?
Come on up to the mic, introduce yourself.
State your name.
John Burnett, is Panther the only company on the agenda at this point?
There's two meetings. This is the public meeting, and what Mr. Henniger was mentioning was that at this meeting, because where we are in the process, we are really only discussing that. But once we move into the Quorum Court, which comes at 6, then everything's
There
up
was
for...
3 people, 3 bids.
Anyone else?
One of the things I want to say is, we talk about this being a public meeting. All of our meetings are public. Our committee meetings, regardless of what committee, and our Quorum Court meetings, always have been, always will be. So feel free to attend. Please attend.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Malone, or yes, yep.
I'm sorry, I
He mentioned
didn't
it.
hear him.
But I will again if you want me to.
My name is Richard Dover, and I just wanted clarification. When I look at the minutes for the Quorum Court that's taking place after this, it looks like there's public comment after there's a vote by the court, is that right?
It will be discussed and there'll be questions come up before that, but there is also,
So during this discussion in the court on this issue, will the public be able to interject anything, or do we have to wait until after there's a vote?
we always have. Yes.
Usually if you have usually in that period, there's a discussion period. The judge will announce a discussion period. I don't know that we've ever, if you raise your hand and wait your turn, the court's always allowed people to speak. Yes, sir.
That discussion would need to pertain to the motion on the floor, correct?
Correct. So usually what would happen in that, we do discussions at the point where somebody makes a motion to adopt, and we open it up for discussion. We usually let the Quorum Court go first, and then if the people raise their hand, we let them go.
For this meeting, Mr. Faust, I think we should probably discuss the agreement that we have worked with Pafford on and discuss that, because everyone's not aware of that.
Yeah, when we did the second RFP, got three proposals on it. So like Mr. Malone said, the procedure was to choose one to enter into negotiations with. And Pafford wound up with the most votes to go into negotiations with on the second RFP. The first offer is $530,000 a year for 2 fully staffed ALS units and an additional unstaffed unit. That was the original proposal, and committee countered with 270 for the first $270,000 first year and $100,000 per year for years 2 through 5 on a 5-year contract. And this is just a summary. And Pafford verbally agreed to that on April 11th. Committee proceeded on with working on the contract and went back to the Quorum Court, finalized ordinance and contract terms to be presented in the May meeting, and we're right on schedule with the public meeting. Was scheduled way back then for tonight. So there is an ordinance with a contract agreement with Pafford and an appropriation ordinance to be talked about tonight. It's on the agenda. There's the contract, the agreement itself is like maybe 6 pages or something like that, so, I mean, we will tonight go through, I mean, anybody can get a copy of it that wants a copy, or, we've discussed it in prior meetings and, you know, went back and forth and tweaked it and got it to where the whole committee, I think, agreed to it, and Panther agreed to it, and it's just to the point where it comes back to the whole Quorum Court now to be looked at and considered tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we going to be supplying housing, utilities, internet, and all of that in 2 stations for them, plus paying them?
That's,
It will-
go ahead.
Housing and utilities, not internet.
Not the internet.
Correct.
But we are gonna supply housing and all utilities.
Yes, ma'am.
That's what's in it, and say we are, I mean, that's what we're gonna, that's what we're gonna vote on tonight.
If we're gonna do that, and they're gonna do insurance, or if you don't have insurance, because that's gonna come into play. Some people won't be able to afford both. And they're getting insurance, or they're getting the person pays they call. Is that really fair?
Have you run an ambulance? I mean, it's
Yes,
a,
I have.
okay, I mean, it's costly. I think
I was
after
on board for
reviewing,
several years, I helped here in New Building, I know how much you're gonna get.
yeah, I think I think it's an expensive undertaking, and I believe that to be a fair
It is,
value.
But, you know, you're getting a lot too, utilities are not cheap.
Sure, oh, I totally understand.
Buildings are not gonna be cheap.
Sure,
You know, and I'm not allowed to mention something with somebody else.
right,
That had to go to the right.
right.
So I'll put it right there.
Okay. Ma'am, it's possible, we have a clause in here about quarterly meetings with the company and discussing call volume. And there may come a time that we realize the call volume would get to a level that we could renegotiate, excuse me, we could renegotiate the subsidy at that point. But at this point,
Because that was what somebody else had proposed at one point, and you guys not talking about.
okay,
Yes.
but yeah, I think at this point, this is as close as we can get to get something going.
But I still ask that you consider the people in town.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like clarification on the 270,000 for the first year, 100,000 after that every year. Is that including the housing, or is that a separate cost?
That is
It
separate
is.
cost. The housing is included above the 270 and 100.
So it's 270 plus housing?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Next question is, with the contract the way it is, in a year, the quorum court can say this didn't work out and give 90 days notice, and then it cancels the contract, correct? Okay. Does that 270,000 the first year stay if it's canceled? From what I can tell, it looks like it's 270,000 the first year. If the county decides not to go with them any further, that 270 isn't going up to 300 or 330. It's not dependent upon the length of the contract, correct?
I'm not sure, I didn't follow.
Okay, so the contract right now is 270,000 first year, 100,000 after that for 4 more years, I believe it is.
Correct.
At the end of the year, if the county decides it didn't work out, that 270 stays 270. There's no clause that says, well, if you don't stay with us for 4 years, it's going to be a different price for the first year.
In other words, we're not going to be able to go back and recoup that 270.
Right, but they're not going to charge more either.
Correct.
Because the reason I asked it, because normally you do a 5-year negotiation is based upon 5 years. They're planning on 5 years. So they come up with the price of 5 years. If you only go a year, some contracts say if you only go a year, it's going to be a different price. That's why I'm asking.
I see.
No, sir, there's not.
Ours does not have that clause.
And as to the 5-year contract, it's 5 year with the year-by-year renewal, automatic renewal
unless either party gives, I want to say it's 90, I may be off on the date, but a 90-day notice to terminate the contract.
And one other question, has there been any discussion on where the housing is going to be at, where the dam is going to be, at what part of the county?
Yes, sir.
Can you share that?
Sure. The south portion will be on Sarton Road at the road department.
Okay.
And the north has yet to be determined, but we've been talking to some local fire departments about some possibilities of sharing space.
And to your question about, the termination of the contract, it's, in the contract, it could, in the event of termination without cause, date of termination be 90 days from the date of notice. And then you can, terminate it without cause, 90 days notice. Is part of the contract.
And we hope none of that occurs, but that also goes for Panther. They can also do the same thing, 90 days, terminate the contract.
And it, I don't know if you said it or not, but that amount, the 270,000 in the first year, and 100,000 per year, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's, be paid monthly. So, if something did happen, it wouldn't be like, 6 months or something. I mean, it's a monthly payout.
Mr. Chairman, is there anything else you want to do in this meeting? Is there anything else we need to do in this public meeting? If we've answered all questions?
I counsel comment, but
Say that again.
I just asked if there's any more questions or
Any more,
Right.
any more questions? Once, twice. So? Make a motion to adjourn? Dang it, that's my job. A motion and a second, it's adjourned. Can we go ahead and start the regular meeting? No. Go ahead.
We have to wait till 6 o'clock.
Yes, you do.
By law. Ice cream for everyone, do fine.
The
Be my friend. I mean, not really.
what's the name of that place where I picked all the jail there? A jail there, Mount Vernon. 5 over. I was gonna call them. They got that hamburger meat. It's the best in the world. Walmart, you know, get you a piece that big and you can do your hamburger. Did they? I went in there to pick that stuff up. I They got a nice place.
Yeah, I've heard it's really nice. I've not been down there.
You know what the price would be, boy, that'd be a good sideline for y'all right now.
Yes, sir. Yeah. See, it kind of slowed down though a little bit. Yes, sir. It's kind of slowed down a little bit. And I think people like the initial shock of having to jump.
You ain't sucked in. I can't do it anymore.
Like the initial shock of it being, you say, well, it's hanging weight, you're paying on the hanging weight. And so, but if you're getting, say you average like $7 a pound in it, you're getting steaks, roast, hamburger, probably more briskets, you're getting everything.
Yeah, if Felix says it's gonna be a while, I'll ask for partial distribution.
I think it's a good deal.
Yes, sir.
Think about it, good stuff.
You know where it comes from.
Yeah. I think the next one I do,
We hit it wrong and tried to make it tax. They all took 2 weeks off.
Yeah, and, like a lot of those roasts they get, like arm roast and stuff like that, you probably be better off eating off this table. It needs to be ground up, that's all.
Mr. Holmes?
Here.
Mr. Malone?
Here.
Ms. Martin? Here. Mr. Waters?
Here.
Mr. Cleburne?
Here.
A reading, correction, and disposition of the minutes.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as
Second.
written.
A motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Treasurer's report.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Report on committee. Mr. Faust. Okay. Deal with committee?
Jail committee hasn't. And finance committee didn't meet, and we're gonna have a proposal next month for the court. We had some issues with 911 dispatch and staff, so the court will, will have a ordinance next month to consider raising that starting salary to be more in line with, there's a difference of hours there versus others, so we're trying to keep that consistent and raise that.
Good.
So we'll have it next month.
Okay.
If the court approves, but anyway, that's about all we.
Unfinished business. Mr. Faust.
Judge and members of the court, we all know what the elephant in the room is, but I dread bringing this up, but we've all dealt with this for quite a while, and as we're all familiar with, there was a vote on the ordinance in July of 2021. The vote was 6-5. Everybody accepted it. We went on and proceeded to do the second RFP. Everybody accepted it. No issues. And then the reason I'm bringing this up is because when we had one ordinance change because we realized that it didn't require 2/3 vote to pass. And that was about 2 months ago. We're working in the ambulance committee, continuing to try to do our work, what we're supposed to do. I had a question for our attorney about the Panther ordinance, which we have all worked hard on. There's no personal ill feelings here towards any of the companies. But when I was told that the Panther ordinance is coming up, which I worked hard on, everybody knows that, and we all did. That was all, the requirement to pass the ordinance was a simple majority. It just clicked in my head that we did a vote last year that had a 6-5 vote on a different company, and it don't matter really who it is. We've had the debate over it. The reason I'm bringing it up is now that I was told that actually didn't require a 2/3 vote to pass. So what do we do? I don't know what to do. I really don't. This is bothering me much as anybody. But if we don't air it out, if we don't discuss it, I think it's going to be worse. And I'm not suggesting to one way or the other, but I'm saying that if in fact now that we realize and agree, or if we do, that did not require a 2/3 majority to pass, when we have a very similar ordinance with a different company now, almost a year later, that is saying don't require two-thirds majority to pass. I don't know what to do. I'm asking y'all. It's a procedural thing in my head, it's in court. And this was not on the agenda simply because it was not. I went in to see the county attorney about the public hearing, and I'll let him speak here in just a minute, but we talked about that it was too late to get on the agenda, and we're fixing to vote on Panther, which I have no issues with. But I just think if we did that without talking about the elephant in the room on this, there's no way to win out of this, really, in my mind. I mean, I think we've got to talk about it, and if it's true that I've never seen anything like it, I've never been here, but if it's true that 65 vote passed, don't tell me what to do. Just go on, or do we need to revisit it, or what kind of precedent are we going to set when we've done it before? I think actually done it for one, but I know that was a meeting. But we kind of open Pandora's box here. You just won't say on something you're voting this has been, and how volatile it's been. We can't proceed on to this new contract without, I don't think, without talking to it. And I don't want to fight. I don't want to hear it. I swear I don't want to. But if we don't talk about it and discuss it, it could be worse in my opinion. And we all know what I'm talking about. So, I'd like good discussion, if you're willing to walk away from it and say, well, we know that, or if you're accepting that 65 vote actually was enough to pass that, and you're willing to walk away from it. I don't know the right answer. I mean, I know what I'm thinking in my heart.
Yeah, so basically in July of last year, the Quorum Court passed 6-5 an ordinance that would have awarded survival fund the contract. Back at that point, we believed it was 2/3, and so it was not around the newspaper, it was not subject to a referendum if they have to be. And so, in my opinion, that ordinance is not effective. It is also my opinion that we made a mistake and it needs to be rectified. I 100% believe that the 6-5 vote passed that ordinance. However, for an ordinance to be effective, it does have to be run in the newspaper. It's also subject to referendum under the Arkansas Constitution. That ordinance was not published, therefore, in my opinion, I don't think it was effective. That is where we were at. We went on the assumption that it was not, started a new RFP process, and through that process, we've now arrived at a vote on Panther. Panther's been great to work with. That being said, I'm not advocating one or the other. I'm advocating that I think in July of last year, the Quorum Court miscalculated a vote count. A 6-5 should have passed that. If it would have passed it, I have no doubt that the county judge would have signed it and it would have ran in the paper and been effective. That being said, we've always corrected mistakes. We had a issue with the windbreaker, the alcohol permit, when we first realized this. When we realized that, we were still in our window to publish that ordinance, and we had published it and declared it effective. So it is an effective ordinance. After that, I reviewed all of our voting procedures and sent out a voting memo, which I think was addressed in April of last month, to all the court members to make sure that we don't have these issues again. And so I've taken those steps. Now, that being said, I do think an error was had. We made an error in July, and I do think that we need to at least address correcting it. Now, I have drafted an ordinance that I've provided to Mr. Faust that would ratify the July ordinance and award Survival Flight that contract based on the fact that they basically got it in July and we did not award it to them. Now, whether or not the court wants to take that up, that is up to y'all. You can motion to put it on the agenda. It will take a majority vote of everybody present, so it will be 6 votes necessary to add it to the agenda. Now, with that being said, I have been in contact with an attorney who represents Survival Flight. I received a letter Tuesday of this week indicating that they are requesting that this court honor that ordinance in July and take necessary steps to basically submit it for ratification and run it in the paper. I've spoken to that attorney who is representing Survival Flight, and they are requesting that the county now honor that ordinance. That being said, if we do not pass that ordinance again and subject it to publication and referendum today, legally, I will have to advise the Quorum Court that we will need to table Padford's ordinance at least till next month so that the judge can declare yes or no whether or not that ordinance is in fact effective. What I do not believe can happen at all under no circumstances for us to adopt Padford's ordinance, which I'm not advocating that we don't. I'm advocating that we do not tonight, because if you vote in Padford's ordinance tonight and award them a contract, which is fine, and court decrees that July ordinance was in fact effective, we could wind up with competing ambulance contracts, which would be an absolute nightmare. And so that is basically where we are at right now. And so I don't have a vote that y'all will have to do that, but that's where we're at.
Of course, when we talked about the mistake we made, I'm not sure we made the mistake that night, the way I read the law. I'm reading County Government Code. It's a state law, 1414 TAC 908. It says an emergency ordinance may be enacted only to meet public emergencies affecting life, health, safety, or the property of people, which, of course, this ordinance would, it's ambulance service. Therefore, when we did that ordinance, we did have an emergency clause on it, but we did not title it in the title say this is an emergency ordinance. It should have been.
That you actually can't have an emergency clause in a franchise ordinance.
Correct. So it should. So if it had the emergency clause, it should have been determined to be an emergency ordinance, and then that would require
An emergency ordinance absolutely requires 2/3.
Correct.
That ordinance could not have been an emergency. Period.
Why?
And so it would have only taken a majority to pass it because
Why could it not be an emergency
because
ordinance?
it is a contract that awards a franchise agreement.
Well, it's more than a franchise. There was money involved.
Correct. And there's actually under the emergency code, if you look at the emergency ordinances, it says you cannot use emergency ordinances for franchise awards. And that contract was a franchise award, so you cannot take an emergency clause. So what would have happened in that case is it was actually been legally void, the emergency clause, and it would have been effective upon passage after publication, but it never got published.
Okay, I guess to me, franchise is not involving a contract with money, and that's why I said it wasn't a franchise.
We were awarding an exclusive agreement for that service to cover the county. I'm confident that that was a franchise, because it would still been subject to referendum. And that's why you can't have an emergency clause, because it's still subject to referendum.
So there was an error that it had an emergency clause in it as well.
Yes, sir. It should have not, and the one that we have tonight does not have an emergency clause. But the emergency clause in of itself would not have invalidated the ordinance. What the Supreme Court has said is when emergency clauses are added where they're void or you don't state the emergency clear enough, then the court strikes down the emergency clause and the ordinance goes into effect per the normal rules, which is after publication, which did not happen here.
Right. Yes.
So it's your legal opinion that since it wasn't followed through with,
Yes, sir.
that the ordinance is not effective? That's your opinion?
I believe that that ordinance is not effective. I think it was a mistake, like I've said, and I think we need to correct the mistake.
Okay.
But no, sir, I don't think, if it's not published under Arkansas statute, I don't know that it's effective. This was not published. Statute says it's got to be effective. Now, somebody that sits up on that bench right there may be different than I am. That's why I think it's a cloudy issue. All you lawyers use the word cloud. Right now, we have a cloud over what's about to happen, and legally, I cannot advise the county to get into a competing issue. Now, I understand we've worked on this for 2 years. I have myself. I get it. Nobody wants to see this continued again. We're not talking about a lawsuit that drags out for 9 months. That's not this kind of thing. What we would ask the court to do is review the facts. The facts in this case are undisputed. The facts are what they are. Then we would ask the court to basically, yes, is this effective, yes or no? If the court says yes, then we'll have to go with yes. If the court says no, y'all have already done the work for Padford, we'll come back in here and we'll deal with that.
Okay, so one more question.
Yes, sir.
In the Padford ordinance, I was looking at section 7, and you know what I'm going to ask.
Sure.
It says, all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are hereby repealed to the extent of such conflict.
Correct.
If you pass this ordinance, does it repeal all ordinances that are in conflict with it?
I believe it does, yes, sir. However, if a circuit judge says we should have published that and that contract should have been effective, a circuit judge could still rule that we're still in competing contracts.
So do we need to table this and wait till see what a circuit judge says, or?
I think so, yeah, because frankly, it is out there. Survival Flight has let me know through their counsel, which is fine. I advise everybody to get counsel. And they believe it's valid, and that's something that we need to take up. If the circuit judge says that it's valid, then that's where we're at. If not, we've already had our public meeting, we already have a contract, which seems to be agreeable with Panther, then that's where we're at.
So by tabling it and let a circuit judge do it, that removes the cloud?
Yes, sir. If a circuit judge says the ordinance is not effective, then I'm comfortable moving forward. Now, they have also made, Survival Flight's discussed the bidding procedure also. I would ask the court to clarify that too, if they think that there's a problem with that. But yes, and once we get those two issues cleared up, which I think would be probably 30 to 45 days, hopefully less. I'm hoping to file it as quickly as possible, or they will. But yes, I do not think this is going to be something that's going to drag on 6 to 8 months. I think it'll be 45 days or less, and we'll have a solid answer. And once we have an answer one way or the other, if the court wants to take one, that's where we're at. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Is that something you'll file?
So I have talked to their attorney, and we both agree it needs to happen. If it's not ratified tonight, which is completely up to y'all, yes, I can file, or they can file it. Either way.
Well, I don't want to put this off and then wait for them to do something.
No,
They
sir.
don't do something.
No, sir. What I was going to do is actually, depending on what happened tonight, I was going to reach out to them first of next week and just say, hey, this is where we're at. If y'all want to go ahead and file, feel free, because they're going to, if they file, they'll have to serve us through Carl, which I'll accept service. If we file, I'll have to sue them so that we can save some of that time.
Sure.
Because we're both going to have to be parties to it. And so we'll have to, yeah. That's
One more question. How is this different than if we had acknowledged that it passed but didn't fund it?
What do you mean?
If we had acknowledged that ordinance passed in July,
Yes, sir.
but the funding mechanism failed, how is that different than where we're at today?
If you had a contract that was signed and executed, then that was a breach of contract if you didn't pay. If you pass an ordinance that says we approve the contract, and judge signs it, and they sign it, we've got a contract.
But I think if the funding failed, obviously the judge wouldn't sign the contract.
Maybe.
I mean, is that where we're at today, basically?
I think at this point, that ordinance was not effective, and so the contract was not signed, because the county judge at that time did not believe that it was, and I say this, there was no malicious intent.
Oh,
It's not
I
like
totally
nobody
agree.
did it on purpose. The clerk didn't run it in the paper like it should have been, and the county judge didn't sign it, because we didn't even realize till 10 months later that there was a mistake. Yeah.
Is this the only two instances that has happened?
Since I've been here in 10 years, this is the only instance I can remember we've been in this spot besides the windbreaker, which we fixed immediately. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, we've corrected things over the years.
But
Budget issues and stuff.
there's no other ordinance that we failed at 6 votes that should have passed.
No, now that I don't know. When you're talking about if it failed 6-5? When it passed 6-5 and we said it failed?
Yeah.
No, sir, I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, if mistakes are worth correcting, then
Sure.
somebody needs to look.
Yeah. And we can pull the minutes from the last, that depends how long you want to go back. This was brought up because obviously people brought this up.
Sure.
And so we felt like, I felt like you've got to address it.
Ms. Martin?
Yes, I sponsored the windbreaker ordinance. I'm sorry,
I
windbreaker
probably
ordinance,
didn't say
windbreaker. And the reason why it came up is because the gentleman who asked me to sponsor that ordinance went and read the statute on how an ordinance is passed. So that's how all of that evolved. Since last July, there's been other things that have happened. For instance, I believe it was in August when the previous county judge issued a letter to all of us that Survival Flight was pulling their proposal. Okay? So fast forward to January, I think there were, let me finish.
When was that? I'm sorry.
In August of 2021. Fast forward to January, I believe there was a proposal that we were all prepared to vote on. We were going to have a public meeting at the January meeting where Survival Flight had offered to cover the county at no cost, and we were all ready to vote on that. And that proposal got pulled an hour before our public meeting. So we didn't vote on it then either. So that forced the Quorum Court to reissue a request for proposal, which Survival Flight responded to. So when my constituent came to me with the proposal for the Wave Breaker restaurant, and then he went and looked up the statute and contacted me, I looked it up. I went to Rochelle Evans, our county clerk. She researched it and then emailed our county attorney, Mr. Smith. That's how all of that evolved. So why didn't Survival Flight research the law back in July of 2021, or August 2021, or January 2022? I think these questions need to be answered, because they responded to the second request for proposal, like they didn't know that they had an existing
I believe that's
ordinance.
all going to be answered in front of the circuit judge. And
Okay, I just wanted to make those points.
Well,
I just wanted to make those points.
You have to remember that meeting, I mean, that ordinance was voted on in July.
I understand
So
that.
at that point, at that point, if that would have, this is the problem, if that would have passed, if it didn't pass, everything past that may not have happened. I mean, it don't matter, I mean, the rest of the negotiations and the other RFPs wouldn't have happened, because if that actually passed, so
But the point is,
But that was after.
my constituent went the extra mile and did his homework, contacted me. Survival Flight could have done the same thing and they didn't. So here we are 10 months later.
But that's all going to have to be explained
And
in
it
circuit
needs
court,
to
not
be
here.
explained in the court. That's right.
I have another question, and I don't know the answer to this. When we pass an ordinance that authorizes the judge to sign a contract with someone for whatever, does that require him to sign it? Because you could, and does that require the other company to sign it? I think it does not. I think it authorizes him to, but it doesn't require him to. And same thing for the other company, because you could come together when you're actually signing the contract, and somebody could say, well, you know, we rethought and we need this amount of money, or whatever. And so until that contract is signed, I personally don't think we are under any contract. Am I right? My question is, he's not required to sign because we pass on it.
No, sir. On that one, it says the judge may.
May, that's
But
what
I'll say this, in 10 years I've been here, we've never had one that passed approving a county judge to sign it that didn't. And
I understand that.
I mean, we're not playing shadow games tonight. Jerry was the judge at that point. Jerry would have signed it.
I don't
no doubt.
disagree with that at all. But my point is until it's a signed contract, it was not a contract.
Sure.
It was passed as an ordinance, right?
Yes.
Yes, sir, it was an
So after 7 days, if he doesn't sign it, it automatically becomes law, correct?
That's correct. He's got 7 days to exercise his veto, which you can override 3 fifths. But after 7 days, if he doesn't sign it, just like everything else, it becomes law, and it should have been published. And through error, it was not.
Since it wasn't published, your opinion is that it's not.
Since it was not published, my opinion is that it's not effective. But again, I think that if we would have realized that it would have 100% been signed and published, it would have been in effect. Yes, sir.
So, I mean, most of this is, it's relevant, but it's irrelevant to me. We need, no one at the time, we're looking to counsel. So
Sure.
that's, that night, we were told it failed. Nobody thought
Failed.
anything about it. So. I'm not blaming, I'm just saying that, so you can say, why didn't they research what? I don't go back and research everything, nor does probably anybody else, or everything that happens, because you kind of go off of counsel, or the other counsel, or Judge Heber. So, the two of them, but we don't. No, so I'm saying those things are relevant. I would like to ask the ambulance committee if they are wanting to table this situation as well as the Panther until, no.
Understand that the reason that there is a full ordinance here and a full appropriation ordinance is because I didn't want to bring anything up and not be prepared. I mean, you gotta be, that's the reason that's here. I just know that there's enough cloud over this that it wouldn't even be fair to Pafford to proceed on. And I wanted to be prepared that if the court decided they wanted to take this up, everything's right here, and you wouldn't have to wait another month on paperwork. So that's why that's here.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
My concern is should we take it up, should it pass, or be funded, whatever, then Pafford says, oh, we don't think that was legal. So they take us to court, and the ordinance wasn't valid, as you're saying, well, then what? I mean, what, so I'm just, if that's the will of the ambulance committee to table vote.
We have counsel. As much as I hate to, I don't see that we have a choice. Maybe it's gonna take another court to tell us what to do here, because I don't know. I don't know.
I think we're risky to what?
I understand.
I would just like to.
I make a motion to table the Packard. I know that's not what we're discussing, but I would make a motion to table the Packard.
Ordinance.
Second.
That was not on the
That
table.
was not on the agenda.
And now, this one.
I would make a motion to table the Pafford
this
ordinance
is
until
not
we
even-
get a ruling from circuit judge.
This is really not even on there. We hadn't got to there yet.
I hate it, but I don't know what else to do. It's terrible.
Rather than.
Yeah, it ain't fair to any of us, but that's where, and I'm not blaming anybody. It's
Where
just-
we're at.
Question on the motion. So what you're making a motion is tabling the Trafford one so that our county attorney can go before a circuit court judge to get a ruling on how to proceed.
Yes, ma'am, we need to know whether or not this ordinance is valid.
I just wanted clarification on the motion.
And I'm tickled to accept whatever the court said either way, but I don't think we can proceed on with the Pafford.
Ordinance with this cloud.
Nor this one.
That's right. No,
I-
that wasn't an
yeah.
intention of, it really wasn't an intention, I wanted to talk about it, y'all.
I agree.
And I think we must. It's not a big conspiracy, it's not, there was no malicious intent. Everybody thought that that's what happened.
And I think we have to accept, we wouldn't proceed on with the second RFP. Nobody would. And Survival Flight wouldn't have voted on the second RFP if they believed it, but that's fine. That's here, there.
And for the record, the reason we didn't get it on the original agenda is because I received this letter Tuesday, and court Tuesday, I didn't get it till, I think, late afternoon. So obviously, I spent all day yesterday working on this for the court, and trying to figure out what was what. So, if I would have received this 30 days ago, we would have already had something on the docket agenda. But because we care, and we want this to go as quickly as possible, that's why we wanted to bring it up tonight. We were scheduled to be here tonight, let's talk about it.
It was a bad time on my part to just stop and ask the question about something with the ambulance committee that was there, and I was like, oh, next.
I mean, if this would have came up in January, we would have addressed it in February. But it's unfortunate that it came up today.
Mr. Smith, this, by doing this, I should have asked this probably prior to the meeting. This doesn't change the RFP that was out there that we plan on operating.
No, sir.
I just want to make sure.
If the judge rules that this ordinance is not effective, then y'all have already done the legwork for an additional RFP. While we're in court, we'll have the judge, if somebody thinks there's a problem with the selection of the bidding procedure, we'll get that clarified. And if judge says the ordinance was not effective and the bids are fine, then we can take this right back up. Work's already done. The public meeting, we had it today regarding the Pafford. Lots of people were here. We had some questions. That's already happened. We can take it up, vote it in or out.
How long again do you think that might take?
Pardon, sir?
How long again do you think it might take to get that ruling?
A declaratory judgment is a very simple lawsuit. It will not require a lot of discovery or anything where you, because the facts aren't in dispute. We know what, everybody agrees to what the facts are, X, Y, and Z happened. And so you would just present that to a judge, make your arguments, and the judge will rule. I think we can get that done. I am hoping for the next home court meeting. If it is slightly after next home court, the court could always call a special meeting just to address anything.
And the reason I ask is because, walk away, we still have no answer.
Absolutely. And I don't know if that's going on more than anybody else. I live in France, so I get it.
Kind of the
converse or the contrary of what he said, is we would be right back, assuming that the judge rules that we're not in contract, that we'd be right back to where we were with Panther, and we could vote on that one. How about the other way around? If he judges that we are in contract, that ordinance is valid, is there a negotiation because the contract wasn't finalized, or we have to go with the contract as it was written?
The court approved that contract. Y'all made amendments to it that night.
Yes.
And we've got copies of that.
Yes.
So if the court says that that's valid, we will, basically, you will run it in the newspaper, you'll publish it, the court will declare it to be published, subject to referendum, just like, where the city would vote.
The contract as it is.
Contract as it is.
Even if Survival Flag decided that they, wanted something different.
Sure.
They would also be
They're
obligated
asking
to the same
that
place.
it be enforced.
Oh, I understand. But they would be obligated, just like we would be, to that contract, just like it's written.
Yes, sir. They've asked for it to be enforced.
That
So,
was my question.
That would be my argument. I would
Okay.
also ask the court to address the fact that we've won a year under this, and so I would probably request that, obviously, I would not extend the contract, but we need to chop off that year that nothing happened.
Right. So it would end up being a one-year contract.
Before we vote, I'm gonna give us
With the extension.
one quick history lesson. When we voted to build this structure, Holly was our attorney, some of y'all were here, I'm old. We voted that night and called it failed. Claude Deal called me the next day and said, that passed and we're going forward. Okay, that's fine. But this isn't unprecedented.
The weight breaker deal was not unprecedented. I don't remember somebody couldn't counter if we just didn't know what the rules were, but it.
Well, it's the first time it's happened since I've been here.
Yeah, I just happened to think of that. I forgot about it. I thought of years.
I think I was in law school when it started.
Okay. So was I.
We have a second.
Right here. Right here. Sit for you.
Excuse me, Mr. Smith. When you go get a declaratory, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Opinion from a circuit judge, is Survivor Flight bound by that declaratory judgment as well?
They would be a party, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so
Well,
if that,
they'll be bound to the extent a judge makes them bound, but they will be a party to the lawsuit. They'll have to be.
okay, so if the judge rules that the ordinance from July of 2021 is not in effect, then they are bound by that ruling, or can they come back to the county with a lawsuit?
I don't understand the question.
Okay, so if the judge rules that the ordinance from 2021
It's not valid.
is not valid,
Yes.
are they bound by that ruling?
If we would ask the judge to rule whether or not the ordinance is in effect and if the contract is in effect. And if the judge says no to both, then the judge has made a ruling that neither of those are in effect. So I don't know what they would try to sue you for. But
Okay.
if there's not a contract, you can't sue.
Well,
for breach.
I just wanted clarification
The
on
motion on the floor, my motion was to table Pafford until which time we have that judgment. Mr. Evans seconded that, and I would call the question.
Okay. A motion and a second, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Blackburn?
No.
Mr. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Faust?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Henniger?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
No.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburo?
Yes. It's tabled. Move on to new business, please. Equalization appointees. I have one for the schools, and his name's Tracy Hudspeth. Does the court have anybody in mind?
Oh, yes, sir, I had request we nominate Michael Galloway.
Sir, I have a question. I'm going to have to abstain from the vote due to conflict of interest. Can I make that recommendation? Can I nominate him but be abstained from the issue? Okay, I'll make that nomination.
I don't know partners. I don't personally know him.
I own an airplane with him.
That's
That's the reason I can't vote in our partners.
Okay.
Yes, Judge.
Is there only one position available?
Two.
Two?
Tracy for the schools and Michael for the court. So there's one applicant per position?
Just one.
Yeah.
One per person.
Yeah, we would approve both of those. It's not one or the other.
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
Make a motion to accept that.
You can just
To
do a
approve, to approve.
voice vote, yeah.
Well, what's on the floor, Tracy? Let's put there both of them. Well, both of them will be all right.
Both's good with me.
That's fine with me, I'll make a motion. Yep. All in favor? All against?
Abstain. Can't help it. He's gonna hate me anyway. Look like him too.
Proposed ordinance number 2022, authorizing the levy for reimbursement for equipment for volunteer EMS service. Being enacted by the Quorum Court of Cleburne County, State of Arkansas, in order to be entitled an appropriation ordinance for the reimbursement for volunteer EMS service equipment. Whereas the Cleburne County Quorum Court finds it necessary to help offset some of the equipment expenses that the volunteer EMS services often pay for when updating and modernizing equipment, and whereas the Cleburne County Quorum Court has previously indicated that it would be receptive to hearing requests for the volunteer EMS service equipment reimbursements, and whereas the time has come to appropriate money for said reimbursement for volunteer EMS equipment purchases. Now, therefore, be it enacted by the Quorum Court of Cleburne County, Arkansas, Section 1. The Quorum Court hereby approves the reimbursement funds to the Tobin Shawzite Volunteer EMS Service for reimbursement for purchase of a new auto cardiopulmonary resuscitation machine in the amount of $6,050.40. Section 2, the Quorum Court hereby approves the following appropriation. Fund 1000, County General EMS Equipment Budget, line item 1000-0306-3103, grants and aid, 0 to $6,050.40, a change of $6,050.40. The total increase in EMS equipment budget, $6,050.40. Section 3, in the event that any provision in this ordinance or the application thereof to any person or circumstance is held to be invalid, such invalidity shall not affect the other provisions or applications to this ordinance, which can be given effect without the invalid provision or application, and to this end, the provisions of this ordinance are declared to be severable. Section 4, all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are hereby repealed to the extent of such conflict. Thank you.
It's an appropriation.
Okay. Motion to accept the ordinance.
Yep, motion to accept. It's an appropriation, so it can be read one time, so your motion to accept was in good form.
Thank you.
Discuss it. Discussion?
Is there anybody here from the department?
Who seconded it?
Would you come?
Who seconded it?
I'll second.
Okay.
His hearing aid. Hearing aid. Yeah. Yeah. Remind me, state your name, please. Mike Kirkpatrick. Yeah. You and I and Mr. Evans discussed this, I don't know if it was last month, the one form, we had asked for some financials from the department. I hadn't received those yet. Are they?
We've been trying to do other things and we're having a board meeting to get all taken care of.
Okay. There's a motion on the table. I would make a motion to table it until those are received.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
Yeah, there is a motion on the floor. But if you vote no on it, you can always bring it back next month. There's nothing saying you can't.
We had asked for a balance sheet and their budget, and the reason, we're not picking on anybody. As members of the finance committee, we require that from all of our grant and agency recipients. This is not something we've done specifically for them. It's for our information, but it's also to maintain precedence of how we handle grants and aid. And my wish would be that we hold this until we receive that information.
Any more discussion? Well, I want to reiterate that because we did talk. Going forward, this could affect several different areas or departments. And we just want to make sure, we don't want to be superseding what a board has already told. We may end up funding and didn't know, but we wanted also to see the finances. I mean, what if there's $200,000 in the bank and they're asking the county or the taxpayer for $6,000? I mean, we want to help, but at the same time, That's what we do with grants now.
Well, is this the first time we've had it in written ordinance form?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Was it, when it was brought up the first time, request, you, Mr. Blackburn, and I'm trying to remember, you tabled it. Was it a reimbursement at that time, or had they?
It was this exact same ordinance.
It wasn't, you had already purchased the equipment? Or had-
We've asked for the money, we haven't purchased anything.
You haven't, okay, I understood that they had already been purchased because this was a reimbursement. Okay, thank you.
Guys, the only thing I can add is our volunteer services that exist in the county they're responding way outside their areas right now to help us cover the county while we straighten this mess out. So appropriating funds to a machine like that not only helps Cumberland South, it helps the entire county.
Mr. Blackman, I don't disagree one bit. I just think we need a process to work through these because this ain't the last one. And I just, from the finance committee standpoint, I think it's important that we maintain a precedence. And I don't discourage anybody from coming and asking, but we do need a process and a precedent to work through these things.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Thank you.
The other thing is, this is 2 months, we're 2 months past that. I requested tonight that it came up in the conversation.
Okay, I can't remember the timeline, but yes, I know it
That
was.
2 months ago, and I requested again
We
last month.
still
So
haven't received it.
That's just a thing I'm
Sure.
concerned with. I want to make sure that we stay on top of it.
Sure.
This is an appropriation, so it will take 2/3 to pass in one night, 2/3 of,
Question.
11 is 8.
So when we vote, what motion are we voting on?
The only motion that's pending is passage of the ordinance.
Passage of the ordinance.
And I guess we're ready to vote.
There's no more
No more
comments.
discussion. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell?
No.
Mr. Evans?
No.
Mr. Faust?
No.
Mr. Hall?
No.
Mr. Henniger?
No.
Mr. Holmes?
No.
Mr. Malone?
No.
Ms. Martin?
No.
Mr. Roberts?
No.
Mr. Tamburo?
No.
Don't need me saying anything.
Proposed ordinance number 2022, juvenile drug court grant, being enacted by the Quorum Court of the County of Cleburne, State of Arkansas, ordinance to be entitled, an appropriation ordinance amending ordinance number 2021-035, which adopted the budget for the calendar year 2022, and to add the juvenile drug court budget. Whereas the juvenile drug court grant has been awarded, the 2022 budget needs to be amended. Now therefore being enacted by the Quorum Court, Cleburne County, Arkansas, Section 1 of the 2022 budget shall be amended as follows. Fund 3509 Juvenile Drug Court Grant, line item 3509-0414-3007 drug testing from $0 to $4,300. Change plus $4,300. Line item 3509-0414-3100, other miscellaneous from $0 to $2,760 plus $2,760. Total change of juvenile drug court grant budget plus $7,060. Fund 3509, anticipated revenue. Revenue code 3509-7010, state grants from $0 to $7,060. Change plus $7,060. Total change in anticipated revenue, $7,060. Section 2, in the event of any provisions of this ordinance or the application thereof to any persons or circumstances held to be invalid, such invalidity shall not affect the other provisions or applications to this ordinance, which can be given effect without the invalid provisions or applications, and to this end the provisions of this ordinance are declared to be severable. Section 3, all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are hereby repealed to the extent of such conflict. I make a motion to adopt the ordinance.
Second.
Discussion? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Faust?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Henniger?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburo?
Yes.
2022-16 passed. Mr. Malone?
Proposed ordinance number 2022, jail health care provider. Being enacted by the Quorum Court of Cleburne County, State of Arkansas, ordinance to be entitled, an ordinance creating the official position of county jail health care provider. Whereas the county is contracted with an individual health care provider to provide inmate health care at the county detention center, and whereas the county is a member of the Association of Arkansas Counties Risk Management Fund and is covered by the general liability agreement offered by the AACRMF, and whereas in order for the independent contractor health care provider to be entitled to a legal defense under the AACRMF general liability agreement for covered claims, there must be an ordinance designating the individual health care provider by name. Now, therefore, it be enacted by the Quorum Court of Cleburne County, Arkansas. Section 1. Position. Dr. Lee Vaughn and his medical staff are designated as the county jail health care provider for the purpose of providing the sheriff access to inmate health care as a part of the sheriff's duty to not be deliberately indifferent to the necessary health care needs of jail detainees. Section 2. Legal defense available. Legal defense is only available for claims specified by the AACRMF General Liability Agreement in Section 2.2.10, which may be amended from time to time. It is understood that legal defense of a health care provider who is an independent contractor of the county does not include indemnification for any finding of liability. A health care provider that is an independent contractor of the county is responsible for payment of any judgment arising from a matter defended under the AACRMF General Liability Agreement. Further, this ordinance shall not be construed to create additional obligations on behalf of the county or AACRMF in regards to claims brought against the county jail health care provider. Having designated the county jail health care provider, the named health care provider and their employees may be eligible for legal defense under the AACRMF's General Liability Protection Agreement if they meet the following conditions. A, they shall attend at least one training every calendar year presented by the AACRMF on inmate medical care. B, they should provide proof of current licensure status. And C, they shall carry and provide proof of their current medical malpractice coverage, which applies to patients at the county jail and all matters related to the practice of medicine at the county jail. Section 3, medical judgment. The jail health care provider is an independent professional with specialized knowledge who agrees to use his or her medical judgment and to practice medicine in the county jail in the same manner as he or she would practice medicine outside the county jail environment. Section 4, contract for services. The county jail health care provider must enter in a written contract for services with the county. A copy of this executed contract shall be attached hereto and marked as Exhibit A. Section 5, invalidity. In the event that any provision of this ordinance, the application thereof to any person or circumstance is held to be invalid, such invalidity shall not affect the other provisions or applications to this ordinance, which can be given effect without the invalid provision or application, and to this end, the provisions of this ordinance are declared to be severed. Section 6, conflicts. All ordinances and part of ordinance in conflict herewith are hereby repealed to the extent of such conflict. Emergency clause. The adoption of this ordinance is necessary for the proper and efficient administration of Cleburne County Jail for the preservation of health, safety, and welfare for the residents of Cleburne County, Arkansas. Therefore, an emergency is hereby declared to exist, and this ordinance shall be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage and approval. Make a motion to suspend the rules, place this ordinance on second reading by title only.
Second.
Need a vote.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Faust?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Henniger?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? Yes. Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburo?
Yes.
Proposed ordinance number 2022, jail health care provider, being enacted by the Quorum Court of Cleburne County, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled, An ordinance creating the official position of county jail health care provider. Make a motion to suspend the rules and place this on the third and final reading by title only.
A motion and a second, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Faust?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Henninger?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburo?
Yes.
Proposed ordinance number 2022, jail health care provider, be enacted by the Quorum Court of Cleburne County, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled, an ordinance creating the official position of county jail health care provider. Make a motion to adopt this ordinance.
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion?
Judge, this is just a contract extension. You know, it's the same provider, nothing's changed, same amount of pay, everything's the same. The difference is that the state now requires it to be an ordinance, and so the ordinance has
The
been
risk
written.
management fund that we all,
Yes.
Arkansas Association of Counties Risk Management Fund, that's the AACRMF. They require us to have that, so I spoke with the sheriff, and they provided us a template, we've put in the information.
Correct.
And so for us to be covered under them, this is required.
Is Dr. Vaughn here? Not here, the sheriff's here. I think we're probably okay. I don't have any other questions, really. The amount that Dr. Vaughn does this for is, we're really happy to have him for that. The contract is attached, by the way.
Anybody else? Madam Clerk?
Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Faust?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Henninger?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburo?
Yes.
Judge, I make a motion to adopt the emergency clause.
Second.
Emergency clause will require 2/3 vote to make it an emergency.
2022-17 passed, now we're gonna vote on the emergency clause, right?
How many votes? total do
Two-thirds.
you- I know, but-
2/3, eight.
Eight.
Yes, ma'am. 2/3 will always be 8.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Faust?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Henninger?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburo?
Emergency clause passed. Unanimous. And are we gonna table this next one?
Dispatch agreement next
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. I left you out, Chad. Sorry.
He may want to table it, but I doubt it.
You're up.
Proposed ordinance number 2022, termination of interlocal dispatch agreement, being enacted by the Quorum Court of the County of Cleburne, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled, an ordinance authorizing termination of the interlocal cooperation agreement between the County of Cleburne and the City of Heber Springs regarding dispatch services of city prisoners held in the county jail. Whereas the County of Cleburne desires to terminate the agreement with the City of Heber Springs regarding dispatching services and the housing of city prisoners in accordance with the terms and conditions contained in the interlocal cooperative agreement. Now therefore, be it ordained by the Quorum Court of the County of Cleburne, State of Arkansas as follows. Section 1, that pursuant to paragraph 8 of the interlocal agreement, either party may, by majority vote of the respective governing body, elect to terminate the interlocal agreement. Therefore, the Quorum Court of the County of Cleburne has elected to exercise the option and cancel the interlocal agreement that covers dispatch services and city prisoner housing while giving the 6-month written notice as required by the interlocal agreement. Section 2. The county judge is hereby authorized to issue on behalf of the County of Cleburne a termination letter along with a copy of the executed ordinance directing that the County of Cleburne is hereby terminating the interlocal cooperative agreement currently in place with the City of Heber Springs with a termination date of December 31st, 2022. This termination date is the expiration date of the interlocal agreement as previously signed by both County of Cleburne and City of Heber Springs. And
Cleburne, County of Cleburne is formally acknowledging they elect not to consent to agree to automatic renewal of the interlocal agreement. Section 3, that the county judge is hereby authorized to sign any ancillary documents as necessarily to terminate such agreement with the full authority of this court, court. Section 4, that the county clerk is directed to attest to the county judge's signature on this ordinance and all ancillary documentation as may be necessarily to terminate such agreement with the full authority of this court. Section 5, that all ordinances or parts of ordinances therefore enacted which are in conflict herewith are hereby repealed to the extent of such conflict.
Let's have a second reading.
Hold on.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Faust?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Henniger?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Say yes or no.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburo?
Yes.
Proposed ordinance number 2022, termination of an interlocal dispatch agreement, being enacted by the Quorum Court of the County of Cleburne, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled, an ordinance authorizing termination of the interlocal cooperative agreement between the County of Cleburne and the City of Heber Springs regarding dispatch services and the city prisoners held in the county jail. Motion to
Suspend the rules.
suspend the rules, placed on second reading.
Third.
Third reading.
By title only.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Blackburn? Mr. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Faust?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Henniger?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburo?
Yes.
Proposed ordinance number 2022, termination of interlocal dispatch agreement, being enacted by the Quorum Court of the County of Cleburne, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled, an ordinance authorizing termination of the interlocal cooperative agreement between the County of Cleburne and the City of Heber Springs regarding dispatching services and city prisoners held in the county jail.
Make a motion to adopt that.
Make a motion to adopt the ordinance.
Second.
Now we'll have a little discussion.
Just a little history, the contract currently basically states that it ends,
12/31/22. So, and it states that you must give 6 months' notice. The first year was automatic renewal. So I felt like this was a time to do it before 6 months so that everybody has time to work it out. The intent's not to not do it. The intent's that there'll be a formula there that drives it and everybody knows and all this bickering over these things that is based on something. Now, the city's gonna have to, agree with that, but that's the reason is it's time for it to end rather than just renew it. Let's work it out where there's a formula and everybody knows. The jail's tied to it. I don't really like that, but that may be the will of the court. So that's my reasoning behind doing this.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Blackburn?
Yes.
Mr. Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
yes.
Mr. Faust?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Henniger?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Malone?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? Yes. Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburo?
Yes.
We'll do emergency ordinance.
There's not one.
2022-18 passed. And now.
Did we table that, or did we tabled it? We tabled it? I didn't withdraw it, we tabled it.
Yep, we tabled it.
Okay.
And we tabled
sir. We tabled it until which time we have ruling. Until we have ruling.
F and G, correct?
Correct, both ordinances.
Yes, yes,
Funding
F and
mechanism.
G's table.
I need, do I have anybody out there needs, got any comments? We have a taker. Come on up to the microphone.
My name is Richard Dover, and I want to get this thing before I say anything. I know nobody on the court case and do in the area, but I have some questions about the ambulance thing and some comments. And I'm not for either ambulance service when we're enough about it. The concern for me as a new citizen in the area is that the Quorum Court would pass an ordinance and not pass an ordinance. That's up to
It was up in the air at the time. But I have a question. Once it was realized that the ordinance should have been passed, it was passed, and the ambulance board knew that 2 months ago, why did the ambulance board not make the recommendation to put it on hold until the circuit court made a decision? Nobody has to answer that, and this is a concern I have. If there was an issue, and I became aware there was an issue, why wait 2 months to address that issue? That's a concern to me. The second thing is there was a comment made about survival flight should have been responsible to figure out if it was passed or not. I don't think it's their responsibility. I think it's the board's responsibility, not the person that put the proposal out there, the company that put the proposal out there. As a new person in the area, this appears to be an issue. And one that I've heard about over and over again is ambulance. So I can understand why people may be wanting to get through this, but it needs to be done the right way. If there's a potential of a lawsuit or anything else, that should be dealt with before it's voted on. And that's ultimately what the board decided, the court decided. So I appreciate that. Again, my last point would just be, mistakes happen, but I've been on boards, and sometimes it's 2/3, sometimes it's a simple majority. Please figure that out. I think the responsibility is to figure that out instead of coming into a situation like this again. And again, it can happen, but as soon as you know you made a mistake. I've been on boards and we made that mistake. That's a mistake that you can make because it's confusing at times. But as soon as we realized that, the next month we took care of that. And then there's no controversy. Then there's not people start talking about who's doing what or why. Take care of a problem when it comes up instead of postponing it. Thank you.
Mr. President, if I can voice that. I think
You're better lawyer than me.
We did address it. As soon as we realized there was a mistake, my office issued a memo to all the county employees, including the Quorum Court members, addressing the voting procedure. And so we clarified that. So that was addressed immediately. The reason that this is coming up today, the survival fund issue is coming up today, is because I was not notified by council until earlier this week that they were making the allegation that they were going to try to enforce it. Yes, sir. So the issue, the voting issue, was addressed immediately, and our office corrected the procedure problem. So that will not happen again. The reason that it was brought up tonight's meeting is because the memo, I think it was last month, and so this is the first meeting that we've had to address this. If this would have come up 6 months ago, we would have addressed it 6 months ago.
Okay, well, I just received the debate going back and forth.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm wondering why you didn't debate that, before that.
And as far as the ambulance committee addressing it, we did hear that this was an issue, but it was still within the purview of legal. And so we could have sat on our hands, or we could continue down the process that we were already on. Because if it turned out to be not a valid contract, then we would be ready to issue today a contract with someone else. And we would have ambulance service sooner than if we sat on our hands.
Yeah,
that's why we kept going.
Yeah, I agree with that. I appreciate that you, regardless, we should have a second. Yeah.
And personally, if it doesn't work out, I want an ambulance service. I don't care if it's a force service. I want an ambulance service in the county. That's my goal.
And I would say that all of us as citizens want that too, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, y'all know who I am by now.
Yep.
I got a question. You said that y'all knew it a couple months ago.
We need a voting, we.
Yeah, that it had happened, that.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Martin said that this guy is, yeah, I wanted to talk about that night, and I didn't say anything because I thought it had failed. So I didn't say anything because I thought it had failed. And it had, I didn't raise safety bylaws or nothing. But are you saying that y'all knew, but you weren't gonna discuss it tonight, if they hadn't filed a suit?
No, ma'am, we were gonna discuss it. It was brought to everybody.
So, that's, I wanted to clarify that. Make
If
sure
you
that,
noticed the last
and
one-
I didn't know, and maybe Survival Flight did the same thing I did. I thought y'all all knew what passed what, and I didn't know. And maybe they were like me, maybe they thought y'all knew better than them, and they just didn't go look.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not being rude, I'm just trying to get some facts straight.
Sure, and I don't blame them for not checking it. That's not their fault.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure it wasn't gonna be just swept under the rug if they hadn't filed the law.
No, ma'am, we were actually gonna discuss it anyway. If you'll notice that the last one that we fixed, we actually made the announcement to the public that this was wrong and we fixed it. So we-
And, you know, y'all are gonna put ambulances, Sarton Road, right? And out somewhere around Grasco, right? What about the people that wind up needing ALS at McJester? How long is it gonna take to get an ambulance to them? Because it takes about 45 minutes now to get to the farthest one with the volunteer service that's there. So it's gonna take a long time. So we gotta think about that too. Right now, we got one sitting almost at our district. But if y'all go this, I don't know, will we be allowed to call them instead of Panther if it's that far out? Or will we have to call Panther?
You asked me if you can request a specific ambulance.
Yes, if Panther gets your vote and becomes the county ambulance service.
The county award is for the one that they discussed earlier today. It's for Pafford to have the exclusive in Cleburne County. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. McJester is part of this county, part of McJester is part of this county. And it's way out there. Right now, we have an ALS ambulance with Survival Flight, and I know we're not getting into that, but right now, it sits out by Hollins, which is close to McJester, closer than the top of the mountain or Grasco to them. In the event that it's one of those far outlying areas, if we need an emergency ALS, are we going to have to wait the additional amount of time for Panther to get there and not have anything to use?
It's possible, yes, ma'am.
So we can't.
I don't know the answer to the question, is can you specifically request it? I do not know that answer. That's I don't know that.
Okay.
But that's something you have to consider.
So I can take that up with Elder Cornelius. I can call her and ask her.
She would probably know, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Please understand that Almond, which is in Cleburne County.
Yeah,
and
it's,
Edgewood,
yeah, oh, I do. I'm
we're
not
not
saying,
anywhere close right
I
now.
know, I
It
understand.
may be a little farther from Hollins to Sarton Road for that part.
Well, that's
It's
what I
gonna
was
be a whole
asking,
lot
is if
closer
for that
to
part alone, we could call who's closest to them at that point.
I think
Because
the
we've only
issue,
hour.
I think part of what's gonna make it less troublesome than maybe what you're thinking is backfill agreements.
The problem is right now, everybody's running so short-handed on their volunteer units. They don't,
Well, I'm not talking about volunteer, I'm talking about backfill from other departments and other counties.
okay. That's what I wanted to see. If we had something, if it's gonna be a long distance and, you know, I'm not talking about fell and can't get up. I'm talking about massive stroke, major heart attack. You know.
There will be a backfill agreement that if an exuberant amount of time, if they're vitally, or not, I'm sorry, whoever's in White County or from Heber Springs, somebody would be able to answer that call. We're not gonna make you wait.
Okay.
That's nobody's.
Because I don't want to, I realize we actually need here, and here to do it, but that's not feasible. Unless we can find somebody who can bring that many in here, you know.
Well, they can, we got that money.
But that's just it. You're already offering housing. I mean, you're going above and beyond already. But I wanted to clarify and make sure.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Good to see you.
You too, buddy.